Happy Ridván!
My grandmother Tahir Ahdiyeh will share some stories about the early Baha'is in Nevis and a tablet that Baha'u'llah revealed to one of them on Ridván.
These are stories that my grandmother has heard from her parents, who heard from their parents, who heard from their parents. So now we are sharing those stories with all of you.
Allah, dear friend, I hope to share with you this story which is very delightful, and this is the story that is about a wonderful young man from the small town in the southern part of Iran called Nevis. And the reason I want to share with you a story about him is because when he was in presence of Baha'u'llah on the first day of Ridván in the garden, Baha'u'llah revealed a special tablet in his honor and gave him the title of Job. Some of you may know Job, who was the prophet of Israelites, and he was the one that was patient under all trial. And as a result, he was given the honor of being called patient. Now, Mullah Muhammad Taqi became Babi when one of the leaders of the Baha'i faith by the name Bahiyyih came to their town in 1850s. At that time, there was a great battle between many prominent religious leaders who have accepted the Bab and those who were enemy of the faith. So many of these Babis had to take refuge and build a fortress outside the town to defend themselves. Of course, there were a very small number of Babi against the army of government. But one of these believers, his name was Mullah Muhammad Taqi. So for simplicity, we can refer to him as Taqi. He was very wealthy and very well trusted. You know, he acted almost like a bank. When we take money to the bank and we know that we have deposited money, people would take money and give him, and all they trusted for him to write on a piece of paper that they have given him that money. He was very wealthy, but when he became a Babi, he expended all of his wealth to support the friends, providing them food, shelter, and also to help them to defend themselves. Of course, that incident is written by Shoghi Effendi in God Passes By, and many other historians have written about those upheaval in Nevis. Eventually, in that upheaval, many were put to death, but Mullah Muhammad Taqi was one of the survivors. And the reason he was survived is that the government, knowing how influential he was, he put him in a prison. And in the prison, his aim was to beat him so bad that he would die. So every day they would bring him to the governor's place and threw him this ice-cold pool of water, and he would have 5, 6 people with these big rods. They would beat him so much that he said they have to beat him until the water of the pool become red from his blood. And then they would take him out and take him in, and next day they go to take another prisoner. He would volunteer. He said, that prisoner is old, this prisoner is young. And he would accept to be again thrown in the water and beaten up. The wife of the governor had a dream. It was a dream that he realized Prophet Muhammad was very upset with her because he felt it was the treatment of these 2 innocent men in prison. So he begged her husband to free them, but he did not answer her call. So in the middle of night, he made an arrangement that several people took some donkeys and carried these prisoners far away from the town of Nevis to the place that it was not within the territory of the government. So they become secure. It took months and years for them to heal their wounds, but at the same time he was almost blind and he has been very incapacitated. But he decided he wants to go with his family to visit Baha'u'llah in Baghdad when he heard that Baha'u'llah is in Baghdad. It took him 4 months with the same feet, which were so beaten badly. He accepted the trip of a 4 months to be in Baghdad and in presence of Baha'u'llah. Isn't that wonderful? That after all those suffering, he could gaze upon the face of one who was the object of his adoration. So it was in Baghdad on the first day of Ridván when Baha'u'llah was summoned to leave the city of Baghdad. During the 10 years that Baha'u'llah was in Baghdad, he showered love and kindness on all the citizens. So this news of him leaving Baghdad was so heartbreaking, not only for the Babis who got to love Baha'u'llah and recognize his station, but also for all the inhabitants of the city who were showered with Baha'u'llah's advice and wisdom, and even governor of the town. So when Baha'u'llah came out of his house before heading toward the river where he would cross to go to the Garden of Ridván, the people were weeping. Some were throwing themselves at his feet. Some were pushing forward to take a glance of him, hear his voice, touch his hand. And in that state, before Baha'u'llah get on the boat to go across the river, he paused and shared with the inhabitant of the city these beautiful words.
O my companions, I entrust to your keeping the city of Baghdad and the state ye now behold it, when from the eyes of friends and strangers alike, crowding its housetops, its streets and markets, tears like the rain of spring are flowing down, and I depart. With you it now rests to watch, lest your deeds and conducts dim the flame of love that gloweth within the breast of its inhabitants.
So Baha'u'llah left this fragrance of love, that fire of love in the heart of the whole inhabitant of the city of Baghdad. And the house that he left is one of the 2 houses that is designated as a place for pilgrimage when in future we go to pay homage to Baha'u'llah. So when Baha'u'llah arrived in the Garden of Ridván, and we know that Abdul Baha and his other sons were with him, we are not aware of exactly how the declaration of Baha'u'llah, public declaration of Baha'u'llah took place. Because as you know, 10 years earlier, when Baha'u'llah was in Siyah Chal, he received the intimation of his prophethood, but he kept that a secret. But on that day of Ridván, he publicly proclaimed. And Thomas is going to read to you what Baha'u'llah said about that proclamation.
In this day, a great festival is taking place in the realm above, for whatever was promised in the sacred scriptures hath been fulfilled.
So this day was the day that all the prophetic cycle has been ended, and the fulfillment of all the messengers of God was fulfilled by Baha'u'llah proclaiming himself as the one that all the Babis waited. Because Bab often told them that he is a gate to him whom God shall make manifest. and him whom God shall manifest was Baha'u'llah. And also Baha'u'llah announced and declared that that was the great announcement about festivity of Ridván, and also referred to them in these other words.
The day of supreme felicity, and that we should rejoice with exceeding joy.
So joy, felicity, rejoicing. Now, the reason I shared with you the story of Mullah Muhammad Taghi, and you may wonder how the story of the man who was a survivor of the martyrdom come in place on such a joyful day. The reason is that, we as humans can only live in moment often. It's either joy or sorrow. But the messengers of God are constantly aware of past and future. The joy of present, the suffering of the past that led to this joy, and the suffering of future that bring about even more joy. So that was why Baha'u'llah picked up his pen and wrote this mighty tablet, which is almost quarter the size of the Book of Certitude, in honor of this man, Mullah Muhammad Taghi, and honored him with the title of Job, which means patient. And that's Surah Sabr, or Surah of Job, or tablet of patience, was revealed in his honor. Can you imagine how in this revelation, and also in the revelation of past, always joy and sorrow are hand in hand? Beloved Shoghi Effendi often referred to it as crisis and victory. Always when we are in crisis, we should remember that these crises eventually lead to a great victory. And that's how Baha'u'llah wanted to remind the friends, wanted this wonderful man to know that he has not forgotten the sacrifice of the Baha'is of Nairis, who in 3 incidents, 1850, 3 years later in 1853, and later on in 1909, sacrificed for the establishment of prominent endeavors in the Baha'i world. So this tablet talk about the suffering of Job, talk about suffering of Wahid, talk about suffering of Mullah Muhammad Taghi, and especially Baha'u'llah honor the attribute of patience. I remember reading this tablet, which is very long but very beautiful. At one point Baha'u'llah said, there is a garden in heaven called Garden of Patience. And in that garden, only those who have been patient under God's decree are allowed to enter, which was very beautiful and very profound. This Mullah Muhammad Taghi lived with Baha'u'llah for several years in Baghdad and later on in other places. And he had one son. And like Job, that he lost all his son, they brought the news that someone has killed his son. He ran to the place that his son was killed and raised his hand to the air, said, "Oh God, I had one attachment to the world. Thank you for taking that attachment away from you." Hopefully the story of Mullah Muhammad Taghi touch us, especially in this period that we are facing challenge of this health crisis, and many around us are suffering. So as we rejoice the celebration of the Garden of Ridván, I hope we remember the sacrifice of past and get ourselves ready for the sacrifices that we make, especially financially and by our deeds, because Mullah Muhammad Taghi was a symbol of giving up all his wealth to draw nearer to Baha'u'llah which was eventually fulfilled by gazing his eyes on the beautiful face of his beloved. Thank you for listening, and I hope you had a good time.
O Lord, enable all the peoples of the earth to gain admittance into the paradise of thy faith, so that no created being may remain beyond the bounds of thy good pleasure. From time immemorial thou hast been potent to do what pleaseth thee, transcendent above whatsoever thou desirest.
While in the garden of Ridván, there were several nights where the wind was very, very strong, and Baha'u'llah's tent would sway about in the wind. Some of the companions and friends of Baha'u'llah decided that they would hold his ropes steady all day and all night, and they chose to do this to be of service to Baha'u'llah, and it brought them such happiness to be so close to him. One night, one of the companions observed Baha'u'llah while holding his ropes.
Baha'u'llah was walking down the moonlit, flower-laden avenues, and he was observing how nightingales would warble with compassion, melodious tones from sunset to sunrise because of their love for the rose.
Baha'u'llah said, "How can those afire with the rose-like beauty of the beloved choose to sleep?" Can you guys hear the birds singing now? Listen. Happy Ridván from the Kleinhenz family.
I really hope that they can understand my performance of Falta Amor and that they appreciate this style of music in Spanish.
Amigo, soy tu locutor amable. Noticias traigo importantes a todo el mundo. De lo que voy a hablar, de un desastre trata que a todos amenaza con mucho sufrimiento. Es que falta amor, oh despertamos, llevarse a todo el mundo. Tomemos tú y yo medidas preventivas. Si es que el amor y paz buscan, escucharán atentos mi cantar. Falta amor, oh, en el amor. Avancen ya, aporten, por favor. Basta ya de odio y rencor. Párenlo sin miedo y sin temor.